Good morning.
Good morning.
The paramita we're talking about today is morality. What I'd like you to do is close your eyes. Just allow yourself to become mindful. Notice what arises for you automatically when I say the word morality. Right, notice a physical sensation or a thought, a word, a feeling. Okay. What did you notice?
I noticed a sensation on the left side of my body and the word fear.
Fear.
I had the sense of doing good,
Doing good.
being told to do good.
Being told to do good. Yeah.
I had thoughts of absolute standards of right and wrong.
Absolute standards of right and wrong.
External, absolute.
What did you think?
Each of those things, and that as restated by Diane Rossetto Harrison in the text that guides our precept study at Alma, that she deals with this issue early on and says that the precepts don't fit the Western conception of morality, or at least the,
All that came to you automatically?
you know. What's the phrase? A flash of thought.
A flash of thought.
And it takes a long time to unpack it. But at any rate, that it's more about a backward step to examine what you do with other people.
What you do with other people.
There's some hands on the,
Yes,
on the,
Rosemary.
Should.
Should. Genevieve?
Well, my chest got full of heat and I felt rage at the immorality of what's being done to people right now.
So you felt anger.
Rage, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have these associations, and this is why this is a kind of a difficult paramita for us to talk about, you know. I feel like morality's had kind of a bad rap, and it's been thoroughly trashed lately, although I think it's poised to make a big comeback. And I wondered about what makes people so uncomfortable about that word, and in what sense do we use it in our teaching here? So when we talk about the paramita of morality, what are we really talking about? And I think we tend to think of morality as abiding by some set of rules or commandments, standards. And of course, as individualists, we don't like the idea of someone else telling us what to do. So often the system of rules is seen as oppressive and punishing and filled with judgments of oneself and others. But even in rebelling against some particular system of rules, we recognize there's a distinction between wholesome and unwholesome actions. Even in rebellion, right? Between that which is harming and that which is not. Our Sangha's name is a clue. As Stephen Batchelor wrote, Appamada is not just the occasional mindful thought or attentive state of mind. It's actually a commitment to being attentive. It's more than just a meditative state of mind. It's more than just being mindful. It has to do with that primary ethical or moral orientation we have in life, with which we bring into being whatever activity we're engaged in. Whether in formal meditation, in our interactions with other people, in our social concerns, or in our political choices, it's the energetic cherishing of what we regard as good. So I like that framing of it. It's the energetic cherishing of what we regard as good. So how has this been conveyed traditionally in our Buddhist teachings? So Dale Wright writes, the most basic moral teaching for Buddhist monks and nuns, and therefore the one most committed to memory, is a list of 10 precepts. These are not the same precepts that we study and that these are the precepts for monks in the original teachings. The first 5 of which constitute the moral fundamentals of the laity, so we share those first 5. These require that a Buddhist refrain from 1, harming living creatures. 2, taking what has not been given. 3, inappropriate sexual activity. 4, false speech. 5, intoxicants that lead to carelessness. 6, eating after midday. This is where it starts to be more monk-like, I think. 7, attending entertainment. 8, wearing jewelry or perfume. 9, sleeping on luxurious beds. Which compared to early Buddhist times, I think all of us would have to confess to. And 10, handling money. So we don't handle money anymore, we have credit cards, so. The precepts are part of the path of training meant to inculcate states of mind from which moral action might one day flow naturally. So we train in these things so that they will become natural to us, habitual, and intuitive. However, he points out, grasping the precepts too firmly and too rigidly was thought to prevent the development of more skillful forms of moral awareness. Moreover, attachment to moral rules often undermines the compassionate and liberating connection to other people that morality intends to cultivate in a society. That's what our moral norms and rules are supposedly for. Wherever rule following becomes mechanical and self-serving, where there is only joyless guarding of one's own moral standing, there the perfection of morality, and in fact any of the other paramitas as well, is impossible. So, wherever rule following becomes mechanical and self-serving, where there's joyless guarding of one's own moral standing, there the perfection of morality is impossible. Another common problem recognized by Buddhists is the tendency to be moralistic or judgment about the quality of others' actions while being inattentive to one's own. So, or excusing one's own. It was also recognized in Mahayana sutras that morality, like any other sophisticated dimension of human culture, only arises under certain conditions. It is not possible, for example, to expect someone who is hungry to be concerned about moral self-cultivation or to care about how others are faring. Bodhisattvas, therefore, placed a good deal of attention on background conditions that would have made the cultivation of enlightened morality possible. We'd like to believe that morality is something to be decided by each individual. We have freedom. But we can see where that thought leads us. We're all shaped by our conditioning, our upbringing, our schooling, and our unique lived experiences. But we do not live as isolated individuals. We live in families, communities, societies. There needs to be some agreement about how to do so in peace and with some trust in each other, or at least with some kind of a shared worldview. So inevitably, there arises some set of shared expectations and norms. What we think of as moral has evolved over time, not as swiftly as we wish, and not without conflict and struggle. At times, the struggle has been brutal, but there is a general expanding of who and what is included in our care, our moral sphere. So, for example, it becomes a moral issue if we recycle, right? Or we buy clothes from approved vendors who, have care for the environment and for their workers. And so this moral sphere has gradually expanded, greatly expanded to care for the environment, care for rivers and mountains and trees. I think we might view morality as a spiritual development, And the way I like to think about this is in terms of spiral dynamics, which we often teach here, based on this research by Claire Graves that revealed the common frames in which people held their values and viewed their worlds, their moral compass. The frames were the product of both external life conditions and internal capacities, physical, psychological, and social. He called this model the double helix of human development: external conditions, internal capacities. It defined developmental and evolutionary paths of individuals, groups, and societies. You might think about this development in terms of the growth of a child, or even a sangha. You might consider what stage might reflect your own moral compass. At the beige level, the world is an animal habitat. People are amoral, following animal instincts of mammals. In the present, it's rare, but it can be seen, for example, in infants or those struck by serious catastrophes. Morality has not yet arisen or can't even be a consideration. You're just living life as an animal. This is followed by, or succeeded by, the purple, what's called the purple level, in which the world is permeated by mystical spirits. Morality is a kind of appeasement for these spirits, avoiding their wrath and trying to get on their good side. So we sometimes see this in young children, so superstitious about, this, or baseball pitchers, highly superstitious. But this sense that there's a mystical animation around us, of the spirit world. This is succeeded by what's called the red level, which views the world as a dog-eat-dog world. Might makes right. Morality is based on power and loyalty to power. It's a kind of self-satisfying morality. If you have the power, you're in the right. I think of middle school. Blue level follows, in which rules and structure bring order out of violence and chaos. See the emerging of churches, the emerging of institutions. Morality is, in this case, abiding by the rules. A lot of us have grown up in sort of blue level systems, and finding your place in the hierarchical structure. Where do you belong? It's a self-sacrificing morality. I don't do what I feel, I do what the rules are, I do what, right? This is succeeded by the orange level, in which the world is competitive and promising. Morality is associated with success. What succeeds is morally acceptable. That might mean financial success, but also artistic or scientific success. So there we get the cases like the Tuskegee Airmen, rationalized. This study? No,
Oh,
the long study of the
Tuskegee
Airmen.
experiments.
Yeah.
But
with syphilis.
with syphilis, right?
Yeah.
That was actually different from the airmen.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Oh,
yes.
but the sense that what's ethical is what succeeds, like it's worth what we would consider, unethical methods to achieve the ends of success. So there are many, many other dubious examples of morals conforming to the desire for success. Competition, fame, and glory. It's not always about money. It's about being first, being successful, being viewed as the one. So it's a very self-expressive morality, and it's characterized by things like people saying things like, I gotta be me, and songs like I did it my way, and it's, So we'll often see this in teenagers, this kind of energy, this orange level energy. I'm gonna create new things, I'm gonna innovate, I'm gonna break things and move fast, right? So this is succeeded by the green level, and the green level sees the world as a collaborative space. Morality is associated with cooperation and inclusion and care. But what about the people who don't want to be included? What about those who do not want to share or to help? What about those who do not care about others? What about those who, for whatever reason, we cannot help? How are they included? It's unthinkable, it's unimaginable with this level, right? But it is a self-sacrificing level. It is, I will, do my best to ensure that everyone feels included and everyone is part of the conversation, right? So it becomes untenable, because we literally can't include everyone. It's not possible, and particularly the people who don't want to be included. So the next thing that succeeds this is what's called the yellow level. And in the yellow level, the world is a fluid space of possibility. Morality is associated with freedom, with flux and flow, and otherwise unfettered. Live and let live. Go with the flow, follow your bliss. Don't try to change what you can't do anything about. So there's not this torment of, we've got to make the world a better place. It's like, I will do what I can in my limited capacity or in my sphere. But the most important thing is that people be free. This has its obvious problems, because it's kind of unmoored, right? It's not really guided by anything. So it can be just kind of like this random walk. People creating new businesses, then leaving them, then doing something else with some other people, and there isn't a there. It's succeeded by the turquoise level, which is the chaotic cosmos. That's chaos and order together, right? The chaotic cosmos, a world in peril. Morality cannot be isolated. Every thought, word, and act is connected to the whole. What causes harm to any part of it damages the whole in ways seen or unseen. We're subject, that means, to the well-being, intentions, and moral qualities of every other living being. There is no self in it. There's no need for its expression or sacrifice. Just thinking and speaking and acting on behalf of the whole. That's what's coming through in turquoise level. Does that make sense? That's a kind of an evolution, a kind of development of our understanding of what morality is.
The word again is a combination of chaos and what?
Order.
Order, okay.
Yeah. So you recognize that these are active and complementary forces in the world. So Donella Meadows explains this. I'm going to get to you in just a minute here. Explains this as living successfully in a world of complex systems means expanding not only time horizons and thought horizons. Above all, it means expanding the horizons of caring. There are moral reasons for doing that, of course, and if moral arguments are not sufficient, then systems thinking provides the practical reasons to back up the moral ones. The real system is interconnected. No part of the human race is separate either from other human beings or from the global ecosystem. It will not be possible in this integrated world for your heart to succeed if your lungs fail, or for your company to succeed if your works fail, for the rich in Los Angeles to succeed if the poor fail, or for Europe to succeed if Africa falls, or for the global economy to succeed if the global environment fails. As with everything else about systems, most people already know about the interconnections that make moral and practical rules turn out to be the same rules. They just have to bring themselves to believe what they know. So I asked Joel to come and have a bit of a dialogue about this issue of morality, because Joel has long been our head teacher for the Precepts program and has dealt with a lot of questions people have about the Precepts and about our ethical and moral foundations in Zen, which some people don't even know are there. So when I first was working with Zen Center in San Diego, I had a friend who was in a partnership, and she cheated on her partner. And she said to me, well, I'm just being Zen, I'm just being spontaneous and doing what feels right, And I'm like, no, that's not quite it. We do have spontaneity as a value, but it's always, grounded by this deep sense of care for others and by a real ethical foundation, right? And a lot of people are not aware of that. So I'm so happy that you're willing to talk about this with us, because you have so much experience, and because I think of you always as a deeply ethical person, and I've known this about you for many years. A compassionate person, a caring person, but also deeply ethical. And so I was wondering about this. is that something you had in childhood? Did you have a strong sense of, like being upright, having integrity, being a moral person?
That's a lovely question. What I had was the model of my parents, who were both deeply ethical. My father would never take anything that was not freely given. And I understood that as a child. And I thought, well, that's a good way to be. Maybe I'll steal a candy bar or something, that looks really good, but I'll get back to this, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
I mean, there were times when I violated
right.
what was being shown to me, but
But that also taught you something.
that taught me something, yeah, exactly. Can I break in and say also, the folks who have participated in the precepts program with me in the last couple of years, would you raise your hand?
Raise your hands.
So, and these are people that I've learned a lot from,
Yeah.
So, and I may call on some of them.
Yeah, so you originally had it from your family, and then what was it like for you in school, and how did that play out as you sort of broadened your scope to, your world got bigger with school and friends and?
Again, I think of the example of my father and my mother, who were both generous with their time and did a lot of volunteer work. They tutored the neighborhood kids who, their neighborhood that they lived in and where I grew up changed over time. And it became, instead of a working class white neighborhood, it became a primarily Hispanic neighborhood. And they saw that their neighbors needed help in various ways, and they responded to that generously. So I had that example, and I think of responsiveness to the needs of others. I tried to do that in my relationships at school.
So there's compassion at the heart of it.
There's compassion at the heart of it, yeah.
Yeah, which is certainly at odds with people's experience of it as inspiring fear or anger or judgment or shame, right? I'm pretty sure your parents weren't shaming your neighbors that they were tutoring or.
No.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I went to Catholic schools.
Well, there's that.
So there's that.
There's that, yeah.
Yeah, so there was a contrast.
Yeah, in which there's an explicit set of rules
Right,
and a whole mechanism for enforcing them.
right. And a whole concern about purity that was antithetical, I think, to compassionate engagement with other people. I remember a nun telling a story when I was in elementary school that if you take a glass of dirty water and add clean water to it, it's still dirty water. If you take a glass of clean water and add 1 drop of dirty water, it's all dirty water. And I just like, come on. How can live this way, I mean, even as a third grader.
Even as a third grader, you'll
Yeah.
recognize this
This
unattainable
is
standard.
unattainable standard that will harm relationships. It's not kind to think that way.
That's right.
Yeah.
So you already had this deep strain of kindness and you recognized that that was one of your primary values.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty young.
It was pretty young, yeah. And it's only later, I mean, I struggled with this disjunction
Right.
many years, and only much later that I realized, I did have a sense of integrity as a child. I felt very powerless
Yeah.
in this world where there was all these disagreements and all this stuff. But it was a discovery of a sense of my own integrity that, I do want to be kind and I can direct myself to that.
And you could,
And I'm working on that now.
and you could sustain that even though probably some of your friends didn't share that.
Oh, indeed.
Yeah. So probably had faced a lot of challenges to that.
Indeed.
And we all do, every day, right? Facing challenges to that inner sense of personal integrity. So there's a felt sense that's internal. This is wholesome, this is not wholesome. This is wise, this is unwise. Doesn't mean we always do the wise thing, but we recognize this is not wise. So that's sort of our gyroscope, right? That's maintaining our sense of rightness in the world, or our presence in the world, the kind of presence we want to be in the world. So I have this question too, which is, what inspired you to teach the Precepts program?
There was a need. Todd had done it for several years. You had done it for several years before that. You had welcomed me to join you in part of the teaching of the Precepts program. So I felt, one, empowered or accepted. And then Todd wanted to step back. And I thought, well, I'll try. I'll try and do that. And it was that combination.
What surprised you about teaching it?
How much? Well, that's a long list. That's a long list.
List of
things,
surprises.
But yeah, I mean, I knew going in that I would learn, and I would learn about life circumstances of people who would share important stories from their lives, and so that was not exactly a surprise, except that it was a surprise every time.
Yeah.
It was in the sense of not surprise, but discovery,
Right.
and discovery in the sense of uncovering, and the other thing was that I read more about Dogen and what he says about morality, and how surprising that was. I used a book, the famous Brad Warner book, called "Don't Be a Jerk," and other teachings from Dogen about morality. And basically, what Dogen writes, and let me just check this with you. I mean, I don't want to misstate it, but what Dogen writes is basically, if you are not doing wrong, you're not a jerk. You're not doing wrong. You're never a jerk. It's when you are doing wrong, you need to stop that. Otherwise, you're in your Buddha nature, whether you know it or not.
Right.
And that's a revelation for a little Catholic altar boy.
Yeah. Well, it's like if you're running, you're a runner.
Yeah.
Not running, you're not a runner.
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah.
So those things.
It's a one-year program. It's a long program. I mean, lots of our classes are just 4 classes, meaning once a week. And the Precepts program is long. It's a year long.
And with it's once a month, so there's big gaps in between.
Yeah.
It does provide time for some exploration, and that I was so grateful to the folks who participated in the class, and others who came forward to help me. I'm looking at Rosemarie and Jessica and others who came forward to make presentations about different aspects of being able to, like, Rosemarie was one of the people who presented on trauma, and how taking the backward step can be very painful, and in fact debilitating for certain, under certain circumstances for certain people, and that you can't expect everybody to react the same way.
Right.
That was that was a huge lesson for
It's
me.
huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's so interesting, because that month settling into each precept gives you a chance to really explore it in different dimensions, and it's useful in that way.
Yeah. And again, Diane Rossetto, in her phrasing of the precepts, is always turning it toward the positive.
Toward the
Instead of saying, don't steal, she says, I take up the path, that it's a path, and that it is a path of, this extends throughout all the precepts, but meeting people on equal ground, being generous, being truthful, and other aspects of right speech and right action.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like her presentation of the precepts as a path that we're taking up. The Buddha described them as pristine gifts, because he said, when you refrain from harming, you give others the gift of fearlessness, and then you yourself have the gift of fearlessness. And I love that way of thinking about it as these pristine gifts, and not as do's and don'ts or commandments or rules, but these are the gifts we give each other. The gift of not taking what is not given.
Yeah. Yeah.
And thinking about them in that light changed a lot for me, thinking about, oh, this is a gift. This is a part of our quality of care, and they're relational. It's not possible to follow the precepts if you were living on a desert island alone. There's no occasion for them, right?
Well, I also, in my efforts to do my best to present what I could about the precepts, really emphasized the lessons from internal family systems, which is that we have a whole crowd.
Well, that is true.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that the way we meet these conflicting voices, and it is also crucial to how we act
That's
with
right.
other people.
That's right. So a lot of our self-criticism, we can say, you're disparaging the triple treasure. You're disparaging the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha and me.
And that's something that's not covered by Diane Rossetto.
No, yeah.
That you emphasized in your teaching, and that I tried to bring into the
Yeah,
study as well.
yeah. Yeah, so where are we on time?
8:04.
8:04. So I'm wondering if there's anything more you want to add about this topic of morality.
Well, may I ask for help from folks who participated in the class?
Sure.
Is there anything that
Stands out for you?
stands out for you in the questions, particularly with questions that Heck's asking?
Well, I'm just gonna say the thing that was really revelatory for me in studying with Diane Rossetto, just that formulation was the invitation to explore and examine in your own life, when you are not being truthful, for example, with compassion and lack of judgment, just like looking at that, and that was really, it was like an explosion for me in terms of like, oh my God, just a way of seeing yourself as not bad, but like, what is this? What are the conditions that are giving rise to not telling the truth, or whatever it is. And that was just an extremely helpful way for me to approach it, and one that I was not conditioned to,
Yes.
to say the least.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. I think it's so hard to decouple that sense of morality, that exploration of morality, from judgment, self-judgment, judgment of others, It's very, it's a practice. You have to practice, yeah. Yeah.
Could you remark more on that about, and the people online had asked us to identify ourselves yesterday, I guess because we're so small, but it's Bridget. Can you expand more on this thing of self-judgment and judgment?
Yeah, so we associate morality with judgment. right? And if you think about it in terms of cherishing what's wholesome or cherishing the good, there's not a judgment sort of component to that. It's active cherishing, right? And it's a form of care. So it's specified in the precepts, but it really all flows from the original single precept of non-harming.
May I add something on?
Yeah.
So, I appreciate that, Bridget. And what occurred to me was that self-judgment is almost always rule-based. And that what I was describing as my discovery, and I think what Susan just described, was decoupling that from the rule-based morality and taking it and being able to see it in terms of compassion and connection for the parts within yourself that these other voices within yourself are judging so harshly.
Yes.
You know, or criticizing so harshly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that sort of brings up what I wanted to say, and it's so moving for me to see a teacher recognizing people as living the Buddhist path. I mean, it's so moving, so I want to say first, thank you for that, for seeing people, because I think once we're seen, the whole thing can open up for us. And so when you just said, Joel, about the self-judgment, it's like how I completely see you as, it's like you don't judge yourself, but you come to precepts with this openness of, I am a white male, and you're so just honest about it, but you're not judging yourself, you're just very open to the awareness of morality. And it's just a beautiful thing that I noticed about you during the precepts, is your willingness to be open to not judging yourself and just being. It was, anyways, I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, it was a beautiful thing.
Thank you.
Anyone online, do you have any questions? I'm looking to see what for hands. Yeah, there we go. Now we can see people more
I
easily.
see Rosemary's hand.
Rosemary?
Yeah, I wanted to share something, and something you said, Peg, early on, with the morality being the commitment to being attentive. So, yeah, I had a really bad car accident last week.
What?
And yeah, and I was, and thinking about generosity yesterday, I was thinking about how I personally can get stuck in ideas of what's good and not good. And so I was on my way to doing something good. I was on my way to a senior center where I do Zen reading with a bunch of folks there. And that's what I was thinking about. And, passing some intersections. And yeah, there was a collision. And yeah, it was really bad. And it's just an absolute miracle and a gift that I'm okay and the other person okay. Not so my car. But, the process, like Joel was saying, of not judging, really, especially with the practice, So anyway, I wanted to share that, commitment to being attentive and how dangerous it can be not to be. That was the wake-up call for me.
Yeah. Very vivid.
Very vivid, and a lot of reflection on all of that. On all of that, the idea of being good. I mean, I like doing this, but I was clearly with them. I was going there. That's where I was. I was there, not here.
Uh-huh.
Mm.
And how
And
do we do that, right? In the car?
yes, and I'm thinking, when I think about cars now, today, of course, the power that we all have that we just really take for granted when we're in them, and the variety of people and beings and moods and all of it, it's really a miracle that there's not more of these things. But anyway, I wanted to share that, and yeah, because I think it does relate to what we're talking about.
Of course it does. And
Yeah.
there's judgment that plays into it, because what has to be determined immediately is who was at fault. Who was
Yeah, and it's the other person, because they had what they call traffic controls. They had a stop sign. And there were two of us, and had I been more attentive, I think it would, it clearly would not have been what it was. But yes, so there's all of that, but lots for me to be thinking about and reflecting on, like Susan said, with, as little judgment doesn't help anything, but
Yeah.
reflection helps a lot. So thank you for listening.
Well, I'm so sorry that happened to you. That's a lot of aggravation follows from that. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
I just want to say that on this specific precept, I'm sorry, I'm Stephanie. Hi, guys.
And you have to speak up a little bit so they can hear you.
Sorry, yeah, I'm not used to talking loudly. On this specific question about morality and judgment, for me, I've noticed, and I had spoken about it when I was on council. I wish Daniel was still here, because I remember talking about it with him, and he brought up the question about, well, be curious about that. And that is that I'm one of those people that I do keep the dollar bills in my car, and I give them out to homeless. But I noticed a big resistance to a group of people who, in the past couple of years since the pandemic, have flooded my area, and those are people who seem to be maybe Pakistani or Indian, and they have their children with them. And I would find such a resistance of giving anything to them. And when Daniel asked me to look at that and think about that, I realized the morality in here and the judgment that was coming up was they had their children out on the street with them, and I was judging that as being immoral. Those children should have been in school, they should have been home, that kind of thing. And it just turned my thinking around about, why those children were with them. Because I wasn't thinking about that. So I really appreciated that, asking me to ask the questions of myself, to be curious about that.
When you think about it, if you feel unsafe, where do you want your children?
Right? Exactly.
Somewhere else?
Someplace you don't know?
Someplace you don't know, with people you don't know?
Right. Oh, so I just so appreciate that, and that was very, very much a moral dilemma
Yes,
for me.
Yeah,
For
absolutely.
me personally, because I felt so strongly about helping others, but I was resistant to this.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
thanks.
It's such a great teaching. That's a
It
really
was.
wonderful teaching. Yeah,
Very good teaching.
yeah.
And we're
I'm
at
gonna-
8:16.
I'm gonna be leading inquiry today from here.
Mhm.
Peg, is it okay if I come back and?
Of course.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna be talking about those kind of horizons, who's on one side and who's on the other, and who's included in the circle of care, and how that has shown up in my life, so. To be able to ask that question of yourself, with Daniel's help.
Yeah.
That's rare. and something that the Buddha encouraged and is
Yeah.
encouraged in all the practice, you know. The first moral step is the courage of asking, could I be wrong?
Right.
You know.
Right. Something feels separating to me, so I'm trying to understand something you said earlier, because I may have misheard it. Something about you have to have, you know, I don't know, some sort of, be able to take care of yourself, food or something, and then about morality. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yes, and I don't think, and it's from Dale Wright, and I don't think that I would put it quite that way. I would say, we can't have an expectation that someone who is deprived of the basic human needs should be interested in moral, you know, precepts and self-cultivation of some moral qualities. So you're gonna steal a loaf of bread to feed your child, right? So it's about our expectations of others more, and that the Buddhists recognize, oh, we have to provide or help provide the conditions under which moral cultivation is even possible. As we have to feed the hungry, we have to, so it goes back to generosity and providing the basic material needs, because when they're not there, people can't practice, they can't, you know, they can't be expected to. Now, maybe they do, but we can't expect that, you know, because they're trying to take care of basic survival needs. So in one sense, they're like at beige level, like, can I get food, can I get shelter? So has much more to do about what is it that we expect and how we understand our role is to help create those conditions.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
That comes
Genev.
up with the spammers.
Yeah,
Yeah. Genev.
Genev?
Is just wait for a hand.
Hi, I just, I'm trying to filter oh, there's so many things to say, but I wanted to echo what Stephanie said about curiosity and what Susan said about compassion, and note that judgment is disconnecting. When you're judging another person, it's very hard to be curious or to hear. And when you're judging yourself, you're being self-absorbed, and shutting yourself down in a way. And I wanted to bring in the notion of shame, which for me was the hardest part. And I really could not look at how I was contributing to being discompassionate until I learned to be compassionate for myself, because otherwise seeing my darkness I would have just shattered. I felt like I couldn't bear any more judgment of myself. And I wanted to thank Joel for always being so kind and so non-judgmental and so welcoming of all of our shadows and our fears, and so healing in that regard.
thank you.